my buddy had hooked me up with them, and they had just needed a violinist to perform with them because they had been sponsored by Coca-Cola, I believe.
Yeah.
And so they just called me and my buddy Joel up, and we performed at the AMAs and got to stay. And it was really like an eye-opening thing because I was like, oh, like there's something other than classical that's like doable. Steven, his artist name is Johan, he called me in for Desiigner, and then called me in for Nas, Teyana Taylor, like just all those bigger hip-hop names that are kind of like on my resume now. And so I put a cover up on Instagram. I had a bunch of people just tag him in it, and he saw it.
Yeah.
And that's like basically how our friendship started.
Oh.
Because he came to LA, and he was like, I want some strings on my stuff. And so, you know, I went to where he was staying, and we recorded. But I was also really lucky because he called me to play at the Shrine.
Yeah.
I told him, I was like, you know, if you're ever in town and you want like strings for your show. And then I think 2 days before, he was like, you ready? And I was like, yes, I'm ready.
Hi, this is Lauren Engel of Sidewalk Talk. Today I'm here with YAS.
Hey, what's up, guys?
So where were you originally born?
I was born in Chevy Chase, Maryland. I lived there until I was 6, and then I moved to Lexington, Massachusetts, where the revolution happened.
Yeah.
So it's like super historic place. I was there until I was 18, and then I moved over here to go to school.
Yeah, and your parents are both immigrants, right?
Yes. My mom's Japanese and my dad's Arabic, so like two totally different cultures, but
so
also
different.
very, very similar in terms of like values. I think that's why they kind of get along.
Yeah.
Because it's really strict.
Yeah.
Very, very strict.
I know. How did they meet originally?
They met in Japan. It's a funny story. My mom apparently walked out of an elevator in Japan at the company she worked for at the time. And then my father was like in the lobby of wherever the elevator was. And he saw her and he said it was like love at first sight.
Oh.
She doesn't think so. I think Japanese people are not very like affectionate.
Yeah.
You know, she barely hugs me. So,
My mom also.
Right? It's like totally such a thing.
It's like a weird embrace.
Yeah, and they like pat you on the back and they have no idea what to do.
Yeah.
But yeah, he chased her for 5 years.
Oh wow.
And then she finally agreed to like have a date with him after 5 years, and they've been together for like 30 years now.
Oh, that's so
it's like
sweet.
a funny story.
Yeah. And her dad's in the energy sector, is it? Or?
Yeah. Yeah. he is in the
what
energy
does he
sector.
do? Or
you know, it's kind of above my head. It's very scientific, but essentially he creates platforms for like access to renewable energy, if that makes sense. So he works on all kinds of different projects. It's not really like one or the other. Sometimes he's like involved in developing infrastructure. Sometimes he's involved in like creating new platforms that make it easier for the energy sector or whatever that might entail. So he does also, he like really is across the board, but he's worked with like a bunch of different governments, a bunch of different energy companies, like even the ones we've heard of, like Shell and like whatever. So yeah, he's a really, really smart guy. The apple fell far from the tree.
Oh no.
I can't even do math. So it's funny.
And what age did they move here? Was it through their jobs that they moved here?
They actually moved here when my mom got pregnant with me, because everyone else in my family is an immigrant, and they wanted me to have a U.S. citizenship, just in case like anything were to ever happen to me, the government would take care of me, right? Yeah. If you're a U.S. citizen. So they moved here in like 92. They had me in 93, and then
Yeah. And your mom's is a chef and
she's be part of a restaurant in Japan. Like her family owned like a restaurant.
Oh wow.
Unfortunately, everything kind of went down after the earthquake that happened back in like, what was it, like 2013 or something. But she works alongside my dad now. She kind of manages like all of his work, and they're kind of like a little symbiotic team.
Oh, that's so sweet.
I think it's cool because my parents' relationship and dynamic is like probably a little different than like other people's parents, because they work together, so they have this like profound respect for each other that like affects every part of their relationship. So it's way more of like a partnership than it is like a relationship, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I like that though. Was it from your mom that you got into music?
Yes. My grandpa on my mother's side was a violinist, and my sister used to play piano, like at a pretty high level. And so time came, like for me, everyone in my family, like all my siblings, I have 3 other siblings, but everyone was really good at something. Yeah, like was your brothers her athletes or something?
Yes,
yeah. So I had one brother that did like professional soccer. I had another brother that loved playing football. My sister was a pianist and like a really good artist, like painting and oil canvas and stuff. And so my time came and I was like, I have to be good at something, right? So I remember I was 6 years old and I went to school, kindergarten for the first time. I didn't speak English, and so like I was kind of scared of going to school. There was this girl that I became friends with. She was like my first friend in school, and she played violin, so I was like, I want to play a violin. Or I wanted to play cello at first, and then my mom's car wasn't big enough, so I played violin, which is a really funny story now, because like the majority of like the work I've done is like all violin based. So yeah, I got into that, and then my mom really committed to it. You know how Asian moms get, like went to every lesson every week. Oh my god. Made sure you practice, and if you didn't, you wouldn't get fed. Like it was like a whole thing. And so I played like classical music up until I was 18.
Did it click to you? Like, did you already love it so much? Like, even if your mom made you like practice it, you didn't mind it?
Well, you know, it's funny that you asked that, because I feel like I hated it up until I was 16.
Oh.
I really felt like I was just doing something because I knew that it would help with my college applications, and like my parents just told me that I had to do it, and I just happened to be like pretty okay at it. So I would continue. It didn't really change for me up until I've always been in orchestras growing up, and I started being in orchestras that toured like around the world and stuff.
Yeah, you went to like all over Europe too.
Yeah, I did.
That was during high school?
Yeah, that was during high school.
That's crazy.
And so we got to tour, and we got to play all these like incredible classical symphonies that like that resonated with me on a different level, I think. That's when I really started liking it, and I started you know, sitting in better seats in the orchestra and like having like leadership positions, and it really made me feel like, oh, like maybe I could see myself doing this, you know. And there was like a really pivotal moment for me. I think I was 17 or 18 at the time, but I was on tour in Vienna, and it was like right after my grandmother passed away or something, and like her last words when she had passed away is like, I can hear it. And we had no idea what she was saying. We're like, what is she talking about? And when I was playing in this place called the Musikverein in Vienna, I don't know how to explain it, but I felt something. Yeah. You know, and I couldn't help but feel like, not to sound corny, but I couldn't help but feel like,
you telling me already.
My grandma was there. And I feel like that was like the moment I just like felt like something kind of extraordinary. I'm not really like a huge believer like of religion or anything, but it was just like, there's something bigger here. Yeah. And I was like, I think I'm gonna do music, like continuing forward. So after that I came to UCLA.
Yeah, actually, when did you perform at Carnegie Hall, and how was that?
Carnegie, I think I was like 15 or 16. It was part of like another orchestral series. I don't even remember. I've just played like so many things like that. It didn't even like click to you. It's like so much. No. That's so crazy. Yeah, I mean, I think I got really lucky at like a very young age to have all these like opportunities, like you know, going all the way to like Europe to play, and like also being able to perform at Carnegie Hall, and just like really playing these like incredible pieces, you know. That's something I really miss a lot, not being part of the classical world now, is like I don't get to be in that big environment where you felt like part of something bigger, and like, you know, bringing together like an emotion together like that. I really do miss that a lot.
Actually, back then in a previous interview you said that you had difficulties like making friendships, and that's how you got more into the music, right?
Here?
In high school.
Yeah, I mean, definitely, like, I was not a popular kid in high school. I was not, like, by any means, like, an outcast, but it was just, like, I was there, you know? And I had a hard time, like, finding my place. I think part of it was, like, I wasn't really involved in any, like, extracurriculars that weren't music. And so I decided to, like, really delve more into the music part, because I had friends that were in the orchestras with me, and those were the people that I would spend the most time with over the weekend. And like we would go to like summer camps together for like a month during the summer, and then we'd travel together. So all in all, like, those people became like my close friends.
Yeah.
You know? Yeah.
And what made you want to study political science and violin?
Well, it's funny. I didn't care for political science at all, but my dad used to be a professor.
Oh.
He used to teach a course at Harvard, and so he's like very like educator-esque.
Yeah.
He's like, you're not gonna get like a music degree and not get like a real degree.
Yeah.
So I was like, okay, like let's compromise. Like I'll do poli-sci, and then you'll let me go to school.
Did you like it? It's kind of. Usually people who like study political science are like really into it. So.
I will say there are a few. I really liked a class that I took. It was called International Law, and it was really interesting just to see how all these different countries like interface with each other in the sense of like legality. You know, I found it very intriguing just because everyone has different rules, and like depending on where you are in the ocean there are different rules, and it was just really intriguing to me. And ever since I was young, I've kind of had an interest in like, you know, if I were to not do music, what would I be doing? I think I'd probably be working as like a human rights lawyer.
Oh, that's cool.
If I could make the cut, you know, because it's a really cutthroat. But yeah, I've always been interested in like something to help other people, just because like my dad all his life has been working for like people to have free access to energy. You know, so I grew up in this like this space where it was like always like there has to be something bigger than you that you are directly affecting. And so after I graduated university, I actually worked at a not nonprofit, I would call it like a consulting firm. It's a philanthropic consulting firm. So for 2 years I was there after college.
And actually during college, what was the like all-star competition or
it was basically like open to like anyone, and you play like a piece of your choosing. It would have to be like a classical piece or like you know, something that an orchestra could accompany you. And I decided to do it like a few weeks before, I think, and I just picked a piece by Tchaikovsky, one of my favorite like composers ever. It was called what was it called? I don't remember actually. But it was really beautiful. It's like I like romantic era things, and so everything's like really emotional and like maybe a little bit dark. It was called Meditation, I think. But anyway, so I played that. I won. And it was like a few other soloists too. And it was cool because they gave me a Stradivarius. It's like a $6 million violin for like 6 weeks.
Gosh.
Yeah.
Were you like?
Oh my god, I was so
worried.
nervous. But it, you know when you like have something in your possession and like the second and third week you start treating it like a little less. You're like, oh my god, my new phone. I have to like place it down properly.
Exactly.
And then you start throwing it a little bit. Yeah, I low-key started getting really like not careful.
Yeah, what's the difference? Like, can you describe the difference for people who don't know?
Yeah, I mean, so there's this like elite selection of violins. They're called Strads. There's only like a few in the world.
That's crazy.
It's kind of like probably like if there were to be like a Bugatti of violins.
Yeah.
That's what it would be.
Wow.
I will say, if I'm being like completely frank, I preferred my own violin to the Stradivarius, which is like much less expensive than the Strad.
What about?
But what about it? Did I like it more?
Yeah, or like why didn't you like as much as?
I think it's just personal preference on sound. Like if there's a timbre to every violin. No violin is the same because they're like pretty much all handmade, right? Yeah. It's like because of the different dimensions, the hollow capacity, like they'll sound different the way they resonate from the wood. And I think the way that my violin sounded was warmer to me and more authentic to me. And I think this happens a lot with like instrumentalists, but you like develop like a symbiosis with the instrument, so that it gets to know you just like you get to know it, and like sometimes that chemistry isn't there, and sometimes that chemistry is there with the instrument.
And then when was it that you performed at the American Music Awards?
That was I think that was my junior year. I was playing for this guy's name's Kurt Hugo Schneider. He's a big YouTube guy. That's kind of how I got my start in like non-classical stuff actually. My buddy had hooked me up with them, and they had just needed a violinist to perform with them because they had been sponsored by Coca-Cola, I believe. And so they just called me and my buddy Joel up, and we performed at the AMAs and got to stay. And it was really like an eye-opening thing because I was like, oh, like there's something other than classical that's like doable, you know? And the thing about like classical careers is that there aren't very many lanes to go to. You can either become like a soloist and practice your ass off for like 18 hours a day and not have like a life. You can also like try to develop a group and see like what happens from there. Or you could try to get into an orchestra. But the thing about orchestras is that like pretty much everyone that has a seat has like tenure. So like unless they die, you don't really get a seat. Yeah. So it's like this joke, this running joke. Sometimes you're like, oh, who do I have to kill to get into this orchestra? You know? Yeah. And that didn't really seem like the lifestyle for me. And so as I continued to do these like non-classical gigs, I was like, oh, like this could be a good fit for me. You know? And so I started primarily as like just doing violin for people, and then slowly that like morphed into I'd start like string arranging for people, composing for people, and then now I'm like producing for people and producing for myself, and I have my own stuff coming out too. So it's definitely been like a really interesting journey that continues to develop as I go, and not necessarily always in places that I think. Like last year I got thrown into a bunch of like hip hop stuff. I never envisioned myself like getting really into deep. Yeah, actually, how did you get more into that stuff? Well, it's funny. So Kurt, that guy that I mentioned, the YouTube guy, he had a buddy that I worked with a lot, Sam Sui, who's also a YouTube guy. Sam Sui had gone to Yale with this buddy that does string arranging for all of the, you know, the more higher up names that I've worked with. And so he just called me in. So when people say like, yeah, it's all about who you know, I don't think it means like this one entity that like gets you everything. I think it more means like people that know people will just, your name will just go, continue to go. And that's kind of like what it's been. It's just like word of mouth. I get phone calls like, oh, this so-and-so gave me your number, so-and-so gave me your info. Yeah. And that's just kind of how it's been growing. Yeah. Then how did you meet Teyana Taylor? That was through that guy. Oh, that was her. So Steven, his artist name is Johan. He called me in for Desiigner, and then called me in for Nas, Teyana Taylor, like just all those bigger hip hop names that are kind of like on my resume now. And how did you work with them? Like, what was the collaboration like? So depending on, sometimes it would be like I would go in and like the artist would be there, and then I would just record there. Sometimes it would be remote, like we would just do it from Steven's house. So it really just depended. So are you like producing it, or what's your role? So for those, I'm a violinist. So I just Steven writes the parts, I come and play the parts, and then that's pretty much like my involvement there. I thought they did a lot like on the computer or something. Yeah, like I mean strings. Oh no, a lot of it is just Steven and I. Oh. Yeah. So I didn't. Oh wow, I didn't know a lot. They still like record real life. Yeah. That's pretty much like the work that I do now for like money. Right now is a lot of like, I come in, I either like write my own parts or someone else. Pretty much Johan is the only one that I go in and I play his parts. Yeah. Most of the other times like I write my own parts. And you just go in, like have like a designated time, and then you like track your instrument and all that stuff, and then you know later on before everything gets like put out, you'll like do like a final approval, and then that's pretty much it. What % of songs these days actually like record live? It really depends on like the budget, the timing. I think it really depends on like what the artist envisions too. I would say like a lot of people are going more back into this idea of like organic sound right now. So they're interested in getting like live strings, live guitar, live drums. Like I think there's this whole new reemergence of like real sounds. Yeah. And there's something about a violin, it's kind of like a voice. You can't really get like it sounding to be like a real violin on a computer, on software. There's always this like human factor that's missing, which is why I feel like really lucky, because people always want like that human factor, because it's a little more warmer and there's personality behind it. And how did you start working with San Holo? So funny story, I remember I was driving to a session. It was actually a session with Desiigner, and I was having kind of a bad day before. I think I had broken up with my boyfriend at the time or something, and then on my shuffle like one of San Holo's songs had come on, and it like brought me like a lot of joy. Which one? Do you remember? It was called B-Song. Oh, okay, yeah. And I was like, this shit is awesome. And all of a sudden I'm like on my way to the gig, and I'm like driving and just like dancing in the car, and I'm like, wow, this song made me feel really good. I think I'm gonna make a cover of it. And so I put a cover up on Instagram. I had a bunch of people just tag him in it, and he saw it. Yeah. And that's like basically how our friendship started. Oh. Because he came to LA and he was like, I want some strings on my stuff. And so, you know, I went to where he was staying and we recorded. And then afterwards...
Were you also, like, coming up with it on the spot? Like,
yep.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, there was definitely, like, you know, if he didn't like something, he would be like, can we do it this way? And then we'd change it. Mm-hmm. But yeah, a lot of it's, like, by ear. Which is fun because, like, something about, like, having things unplanned can, like, lead to even greater ideas. Because you're just kind of going off, like, what you're feeling at that very moment.
Yeah.
So usually what I like to do, if I get the song in advance, I will... you know, like have a few ideas like written out, and then I'll just also do things on the spot there. But with San, it was like everything was on the spot.
And which songs do you do? I think they want to probably go back and re-listen to some of the songs you worked on.
Forever Free with Duskus. I did the strings on that. I was really happy because he put like pretty much like the last like 40 seconds is just me playing strings. And it
so
sounds
cool.
so lovely, and I was like, yes! And there was one more, I think it was called Everything Matters When It Comes to You. I think that one might be it. So I did that one as well. That one we did remotely. So he had just sent me something via email from the Netherlands, and I returned like, you know, files to him.
Yeah.
But I was also really lucky because he called me to play at the Shrine.
Yeah.
I had told him, I was like, you know, if you're ever in town and you want like strings for your show, and then I think 2 days before he was like, you ready? And I was like, yes, I'm ready. And that was like a surreal experience.
Was that your first like, oh no, well, I guess first EDM?
Yeah, it was my first EDM performance. Just because a lot of the time I'm either like in the studio. I don't really get to do a lot of like live things for other people.
Yeah.
I do have something coming up, I can't say who, but I might be seeing people in India.
Where?
At Coachella.
Oh, okay.
So that'll be fun. That'll be like another performance like that. But yeah, Sans was my first. And it was really kind of him just because it was like 6,000 people and he put me like
he's
right
so
in the middle.
Sweet. Yeah.
He is honestly the best.
Yeah,
and something I really love about him is that, you know, he's been where I am right now, you know, still trying to develop. And like, so he always gives me insight and like mentorship.
Yeah.
And always gives me his opinion and is always there for me when I'm like frustrated about stuff. So it's developed into a really like good friendship, which I feel like very appreciative because a lot of the people that I work with, I only see them like once or twice.
Yeah.
So I don't really get to interface with them as often as I wish I could. Except Sans made him very accessible.
Yeah.
To me. So yeah, I feel really, really lucky that I have like someone that I look up to that also like believes in me and also like sees potential in me, like keeps on pushing me.
It sounds exactly like him. Yeah. He's awesome. And can you tell me about Shawn Mendes and Miley Cyrus at the Grammys and how did it come about?
I got a text message, I think. They were like, hi, this is the music director for Shawn Mendes, like, are you interested in doing the Grammys? It was like a week before the Grammys, and I was like, okay. That's pretty much everything. The way everything comes is really casual and almost like comical, because it just kind of like falls into my lap, which I feel really lucky. But yeah, so I showed up the day before we had a rehearsal, and the day of was the Grammys. It was very like streamlined and very separated. Like we didn't get to like hang out with anyone. It's not like I got to hang out with Shawn Mendes or anything.
Which song was it?
In My Blood.
Oh,
yeah, they had performed it together, and I think Miley was like a surprise, so she came on in like the second verse.
Oh,
but,
is that the first time you've been on TV? Oh no, that's the second, right after the American Music Awards.
Well, I've also done America's Got Talent, like a bunch of like back, you know, violin in the background kind of stuff. So I guess I've done like shows, but I have yet to like hop on like a tour or like you know, do something like big that's on TV like that.
And can you tell me about Empty Crown and Goldie and Finch?
Cool. So I had put up an Instagram video of just me making a beat, and San had texted me. He was like, do you want to make this longer? And I was like, I don't know, do I? Like, how long do I have? And he was like, 3 days. And that, I remember I was really like overwhelmed. I was like, how am I supposed to like put together a track in 3 days? Like, can I do it? You know, because I usually take forever to like finish something. And by the time it's done, I feel like it's not representative of me anymore. Just because I feel like I might be a little too much of a perfectionist. And so I always want to go back to like details. So it was kind of refreshing to have this like deadline that was so short. And I was like, okay, like I'm just going to put all in that I can do and see where it goes. and I ended up like pulling it off. I made it like a full-length song, and I submitted it, and they decided to put it on the Goldie and Finch compilation that's coming out this Friday, April 5th. And super excited because I'm like on the track list with people like Drolo and San Holo and just like these people that I've always liked their music so much. I'm like, wow, I'm like, you know, included in something that they're releasing. So I feel very privileged for that. But it was nice because this is a lot of firsts for me. This is my first like thing that's coming out with a label, with Bitbird.
Yeah.
This is also like the first thing I'm putting out that I produced. And I think there's something about like being a female and kind of doing everything. People don't really take you seriously a lot when you walk into these rooms. They're kind of like, oh, whose girlfriend is this? Or like, who invited this person? Especially like a lot of hip hop sessions I do, like people don't know that I'm there to play music until I like whip out whatever I'm doing.
Yeah.
And so it's really nice to just kind of have this like validation that like you are allowed to like make your own path for yourself. You're allowed to, you know, if you want to be a producer and you're female, you can do it. If you want to be a female anything, like you can do it. But it is much harder. I think you have to work like 3 times harder as a woman in the industry.
Wow.
And yeah, you just have to be like careful of a lot of things, like what do I wear, like how do I present myself so that they take me seriously, like when is it a good time to speak up, when is it a good time not to, you know? So it's been, you know, an ongoing learning experience for me as a female going into these rooms, because I'm usually the only one.
Wow.
And I have a couple other, you know, friends that are female that are doing similar things that I'm doing, and they also feel that way, you know? So I think there's like a bigger, I want to say like movement of getting like women to be in the same spots. I think the Grammys just put out this like infographic that said like 95% of engineers and mixers are men, 95% of producers are men.
Insane.
And like it's time now for like women to get like an equal spot at the table. And so I think it's like a really good time, like culturally, to be like doing something like this.
Yeah, that's so true. And actually, what do your parents think? Like, were they worried after college of you like they probably didn't think that music would be your career, right? They thought you'd just be like getting really good at it, like with violin, but to make it into like a full-time and earning off it.
I'm not sure. They've always been, surprisingly for immigrant parents, they've always been really supportive.
That's
you know,
rare.
Yeah, and
my creative stuff.
My parents were never the types like, if you don't get an A, you're grounded or anything. They would let me skip school if I was, you know, they were pretty relaxed, and they were always like, whatever makes you happy. And I think it took some time for them to kind of adjust to like what this is, because I think in their mind, if I was doing music, it was like composing classical music or like being in an orchestra. And so this is like a little bit of a change for them too, because this is not what they think music is, if that makes sense. But that being said, like they've been incredibly supportive. My mom flew in from Kuwait, that's where my parents live now, just to come to my show on the 22nd, and she was like, wow, so like just so happy to see like you doing it, you know. And so I'm really proud of them, because like, you know, as immigrant parents, you have standards that, you know, they're kind of square and set in your mind, and like they have been open and willing to like learn about what I'm doing and
that's
like
so
respect
cool.
it too.
Yeah. What would you say have been your biggest challenges so far?
I think overall mental health is like really
that's something you struggled with in college, right? Like working all the jobs and everything.
I think there's this fine line that you walk as a musician or an artist or anything, where you have to think you're good enough to continue, and you also don't think you're good enough, so you're continuing to improve. And I think you're always simultaneously walking that line, and there are always like doubts that are created. I think now I'm in a spot in my career where I feel like, you know, whatever happens, happens, and I'm on a good path, and I get signs that I'm on a good path. But there are definitely times I was like, I don't know if I can do this. Like the pressure that it causes, the societal pressures of like being a woman and like having to, like they expect you to look a certain way. Like I had someone that wanted to manage me, and they were like, you should wear this and this, you should do your hair like this. And I was like,
what did they tell you to look like?
They wanted me to look like something I wasn't, for sure. And even they wanted to like make my music sound like something I wasn't. They're like, we want this Katy Perry big anthem. And I was like, if you know me, you know that's like not what I'm trying to go for, you know? And they would be like, maybe you should show a little more skin here, or just like little things that I didn't feel like were authentic to me and like in my best interest. And so you know, you continue to realize like, oh, these people may not have like my best interest at heart.
Yeah.
And so you know, learn to distance yourself from those people. But like one big challenge is like, you know, continuing to maintain your health, like physically and mentally, so that you can continue to make good stuff. So when I was in college, I had like a bit of a hard time. I had to take some time off school just to kind of get my mental health back in order and really figure out like, how do I stay happy and stay healthy, and like what are the preventative measures I have to take that maybe other people don't have to take. So I kind of like stopped drinking. I stopped really like participating in like a lot of recreational drugs. Like I just had to do what was best for me. So I started working out a lot, like 2-3 times a week. I started trying to eat healthy. I tried sleeping more, getting out of relationships and friendships that weren't serving me, that weren't healthy for me, and just making like big girl decisions, I guess. And like learning to make those. I've been going to therapy for like every week for like 5-6 years now at this point, and I think it's super healthy. And it makes me sad that there's like a bit of a stigma there of like people thinking like, oh, this means like I'm weak. But I think it's actually the opposite. Like if you are willing to admit that there are things that you need to work on, that there are flaws, that there are personality shortcomings that you could be better at, I think that's an even stronger, you know, stronger thing. So yeah, I've been in a good spot now. I've had my shit together for a little bit.
Yeah, that's so good.
And I think because I saw the worst of it in college, I know how to like not get there. And I think as I continue to grow as a musician, I hope I develop a platform where we can talk about these things in like a safe space and kind of talk about like how there's still stigma even though there shouldn't be, of like, you know, sometimes you get sad, sometimes you don't feel good, like and like how to address those things and like cope with them healthily and just like be happy. I think it's just important to like learn how to be happy in your own way, and everyone's way is really different. So yeah.
Last question, what do you want to be remembered for?
What do I want to be remembered for? I think one of my biggest fears is being mediocre. So I think, you know, as I hope to continue to grow as an artist, I want my music to be something that makes people feel like less alone. I remember when I was younger and I'd be like going through bouts of sadness or whatever, I would listen to music and it would make me feel like, oh, I'm not the only person that feels like this, you know, and like it would make me feel not afraid to feel those feelings. And so I can only hope that like I can make music like that, that makes other people feel like they're not alone, makes other people feel like understood, validated, and like also just like safe space to just like feel your feelings, you know. And I also want to be remembered for like maybe doing things like that were bigger than my artist project. Like I'm hoping, I've always had this dream, maybe when I'm like much older and like I'm a lot more established, I'd love to like make a school for like underprivileged youth to like work in music.
Oh, that's so good. Yeah.
I never got swayed as a young person because I was so busy with music. Nothing ever else caught my attention. So I was never, you know, with the people that were probably like starting to do like stuff like cocaine and heroin in high school. Not to say that that's like a negative thing, but it was a good deterrent in terms of like my life, and like I got this opportunity to do something that was positive that made me happy. And when I worked at that philanthropic advisory firm, you would see that there was like a lot of underprivileged youth that just started hanging out with the wrong people, started doing the wrong stuff, and then their lives were like kind of ruined. And I also like meet a lot of people, especially in the hip-hop industry, that came from that and talk about like, you know, like I'm lucky I got here and there are a lot of people back at home that need this help. So I'm hoping eventually I have like the tools to maybe like put together a program or a school where like you can learn from the people you admire and like really get invested in doing music and have like the proper people to teach you like what you need to know to like survive if you want to do music, you know. There's like no right way, but it would definitely have been helpful if there was like more of a guidance I think, for people on how to do this, how to get good at an instrument, how to be a producer, how to file your taxes as a musician. There's like all these things that like you just kind of learn on your own. But it might be helpful and less overwhelming for people if they kind of have like a place.
Yeah, you have to do this. It sounds amazing.
I know, I would love to. You know, the right people would have to be on the project. There would also have to be like a lot of capital. But there are all kinds of projects that are kind of coming up that are like this now. But I would love to like make a school, and like maybe some like producers that you really love from Hollywood will come like once a month. There's like a residency where you can like teach from them. Yeah. Or like any musicians, and maybe there are like specific instruments that you can learn there, and like the people you like will have talks there, lectures, like maybe you can have a mentor. And you know, there's like a lot of ideas in my head of like how we could establish something like that. But I think that's probably like my life goal. That's like one of my big like in 20 years, like what would I have liked to have done? Yeah, that and like score a movie or something.
Both are amazing. Thank you so much.
I hope so.
Bye guys.
Bye.